Well, good evening, Lawrence.
Rachel, you can find me on Blue Sky minutes of the day. And not every day. But no, my Blue Sky thing is there every day. I just don't quite get to it as much as I should. And I
go in fits and starts.
I have noticed that. You have bursts. Yeah.
I do, and sometimes I'm in one of those burst phases where I'm just finding I need to let people know about this. I got to send this out. So I'm having one of those moments. So if you're into a high volume cable news host posting environment, I'm your guy right now.
And Rachel, thank you for that that kind of assessment of the Elon Musk term of office, shall we call it, and the notion in the end that it's pretty much looking like it cost more than it could have possibly saved in any way, which is just such an obvious outcome to this savagery that they were doing to these organizations.
Yeah, and I feel like, the black eye metaphor thing, I realize it was too much for anybody to resist, but I honestly feel like, if Elon Musk was proverbially wounded, like his image was hurt in some way by his time in Washington, who cares? Like, that's just, in the grand scheme of things, it's not the important thing that happened during his tenure in Washington. What happened in his tenure in Washington is that he wrecked huge portions of the American government and wrecked the careers and, in many cases, the lives of thousands and thousands and thousands of good American public servants doing good work. And decades of work and effort and careful building up of American capability and things like, medical research and scientific advancement and all, being the gold standard in all sorts of international competition. All of that stuff was just wrecked. And what he left behind was nothing. It was just wanton wreckage. And yeah, maybe it hurt his image, but I couldn't care less. I care a lot more about the wreckage he left behind for the country. And I think the U.S. Institute of Peace kind of shows that, and also shows their gumption and resilience and pluck at bouncing back and saying they're going to come back stronger than ever.
Yeah, that was just a great part of your coverage. I'm going to focus tonight, too, on what Elon Musk did, but what he did in other parts of the world. And as Bill Gates put it, the richest person in the world killing the poorest people in the world. That was Bill Gates' phrase for what he was seeing, which is just a stunning legacy to leave and something that only Donald Trump could have given us.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's one thing to be a president who gives whole swaths of the U.S. government over to your top campaign donor, right? Like that's something that Donald Trump will have to answer for in all sorts of ways. But for Musk to have then used that power to essentially to take it out on millions of the least resourced people on the globe is so massively consequential. I think morally we'll be paying for this as a country for generations.
And so, Rachel, on the black eye in the Oval Office, I don't have to. You covered it, right? I don't have to get there.
No.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to take the high road on the black eye in the Oval Office. I'm not going to speculate. I'm not going to. Thank you, Rachel.
Bye, Lawrence.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you. Well, the crisis facing this country and the world tonight is the complete collapse of mental acuity in the President of the United States, the current president. This weekend, the President of the United States endorsed a social media post that says there is no Joe Biden, executed in 2020, Biden clones, doubles, and robotic engineered soulless, mindless entities are what you see. Needless to say, Donald Trump is the only president in history who can publicly embrace and accept and believe such insanity without immediately provoking a rush of questions by the White House press corps and news organizations around the world about the sanity of the American president, which means that the insanity of the current American president is now officially taken for granted in the news media. No huge banners on the cable news network that recently devoted itself to the issue of presidential mental acuity. That network did not dare devote itself to the mental acuity of Donald Trump. That network decided that the mental acuity of Joe Biden last year is a more important story now. No one at that network suggested that Joe Biden was ever incapable of doing the job of president. Their critique of Joe Biden is that he was incapable of delivering a sharp and polished television debate performance, which would have been true of every single president prior to John Fitzgerald Kennedy. What was lost in the relentless coverage of the Biden-Trump presidential debate was that after Joe Biden paused so long that he seemed frozen, that for the rest of that debate, no one appeared to pay attention to the rest of that debate. And the rest of that debate, Joe Biden actually made perfect sense. And Donald Trump did not. Donald Trump did not tell one true thing during that debate. But that doesn't seem to matter to the focus on Joe Biden in that debate. And I can understand that. Joe Biden revealed in that debate that he was 4 years older than the last time he ran for president. And he was slower, much slower. And he was way more than 4 times smarter and more capable than Donald Trump ever was. That was also apparent in that debate. And we all know, as do the pushers of every anti-Biden campaign theory out there, that it would be impossible for Joe Biden on his worst day to tweet that Donald Trump was executed in 2020 and that Trump clones, doubles, and robotic engineered, soulless, mindless entities are what you see when you look at Donald Trump today. What we do know is that we could surely engineer a robotic, soulless, mindless entity to be smarter than Donald Trump. The overwhelming majority of the American news media has absolutely no problem now with Donald Trump saying there is no Joe Biden executed in 2020. Donald Trump didn't actually write those words himself, but he found those words in his poison social media feed, and he decided to fully endorse and embrace those words. The New York Times remains one of the news organizations that finds that kind of behavior in a president strange, though not worthy of big front page headlines. And so the New York Times ran a story titled, "Trump Amplifies Another Outlandish Conspiracy Theory, Biden is a Robotic Clone." And here is the most important line in that story. The White House did not respond to requests for comment on the post about Mr. Biden. That, of course, would be impossible for any other White House if the president amplified, quote, another outlandish conspiracy theory. If any other president said that a previous living president is a robotic clone, that White House would not be able to simply refuse to comment. But that is how fully Donald Trump has crushed political reporting and political coverage in this country. And because he has crushed it, he can, in publicity terms anyway, get away with anything, and he knows it. Donald Trump is behaving like someone who believes he can get away with anything. Listen to a bit of Joe Biden's last interview as president of the United States in the last week of his presidency. We'll play that for you now. We leave it to you to decide if you're seeing a Biden clone, a double, or a robotic engineered, soulless, mindless entity. And while you're at it, you can decide if that entity is smarter than Donald Trump, a better president than Donald Trump, and would be a better president than Donald Trump today. I asked Joe Biden why he decided to take the risk to become the first president in history to visit a war zone that was not controlled by U.S. troops when he visited Ukraine. That is a description of presidential decision-making. That is the kind of presidential decision-making that this country got used to for centuries under thoughtful presidents, regardless of party affiliation. Whatever you're wondering about how well Joe Biden did his job as president, whenever you wonder about that, separate and apart from his job as a presidential candidate, which he did not do well, you can always find that last interview of his that he did as president on YouTube, where, among other things, we reviewed the major presidential decisions that he had to make. You can check that video whenever you're wondering how Joe Biden was actually doing the job as president and what his mental acuity was like in the last week of his presidency. And in every one of Joe Biden's responses in that interview, you will find the kind of careful thoughtfulness you have a right to expect in a president of the United States. It is the kind of thinking that Donald Trump has not been capable of for one day of his life. We went from the man you just saw on your screen to a man who claims that Joe Biden was executed in 2020. Now, if you want to rush to Donald Trump's defense and tell us that that was a joke, then please explain why, as the New York Times reports, the White House did not respond to requests for comment on the post about Mr. Biden. If you want to rush to Donald Trump's defense, you are going to have to guess at a defense. You're going to have to make up a defense that Donald Trump himself has not offered. You have every right to believe, as a result of that single post alone, that Donald Trump is completely deranged and has no idea what day it is or what country he lives in. That is as defensible a reaction to Donald Trump's post as the notion that it's a joke. Neither one of those reactions can be proved. But what is undeniable by anyone, anywhere, the still breathtaking stupidity of Donald Trump to find that post in the poisonous flow of his social media and decide that that's the one he wants to push that day. That is a man whose stupidity knows no bounds. That is the man whose stupidity never bumps into decency, which would then prevent him from doing the indecent, the stupid. In fact, Donald Trump can be counted on tomorrow to be stupidly indecent about something. It was another day in the Trump presidency, so of course a very rich criminal got another Trump pardon. You know how much money you have to steal to get 50 years in prison these days? $200 million will get you there. Where do you steal $200 million? There's no bank that has $200 million for you to steal. The place you can steal $200 million is the federal government. And the place to do it is in Florida, with all those Medicare recipients, in the biggest Medicare fraud in history at the time that it was committed. Lawrence Duran pleaded guilty in 2011 to a Medicare fraud scheme that involved $200 million in false billings. And Donald Trump decided last week to give Lawrence Duran a get-out-of-jail-free card immediately. The guy who got the longest prison term in history for Medicare fraud and has served 9 years of the 50 years he was supposed to serve. For Donald Trump, that was enough. That was enough. Remember Elon Musk lying to you about all the waste, fraud, and abuse he was going to find in Medicare, and he didn't find any, zero, absolutely none in Medicare. He didn't even find any Medicare fraudulent billing. And there's actually always some Medicare fraudulent billing around the country, which federal officials have been very good at policing and investigating and prosecuting. So while Elon Musk was pretending to find fraud, emphasis on fraud in the federal government, Donald Trump was busy deciding exactly when to let the biggest Medicare fraudster in history out of prison. That is the reality of the Trump presidency. It is the presidency that rewards fraud, especially fraud against the federal government. Joe Biden never pardoned anybody who stole $200 million from the federal government, and Joe Biden never appointed anyone to anything as incompetent and reckless and cruel as Elon Musk, who bid his farewell to his formal engagement of service with the Trump administration on Friday in the Oval Office, where his physical behavior gave many indications of possibly confirming the headline that emerged in the New York Times that very day. On the campaign trail, Elon Musk juggled drugs and family drama. We await an explanation of Elon Musk's physicality, including his inexplicable gazes at the ceiling and head twisting at the ceiling in the Oval Office. The Fox White House reporter, who appeared to be the master of ceremonies of the press corps in the Oval Office on Friday because he was allowed to ask many more questions than anyone else, seems to be on his way to ask about the New York Times breaking news about Elon Musk's drug use.
There is a New York Times report today that accuses you of blurring the line between...
Is the New York Times, is that the same publication?
Notice that the Fox reporter immediately stopped when Elon Musk ordered him to stop and wait. Elon Musk then went into a lying soliloquy about the New York Times, ending with a direct order to the Fox reporter to, quote, these were his words, move on. And the Fox reporter did exactly what Rupert Murdoch is paying him to do in that situation. He moved on when ordered to move on by anyone in Trump world. That is the same Fox reporter who gleefully joined in the screaming at Joe Biden or his press secretary in the Biden White House. Every reporter working in the Biden White House knew they could scream at Joe Biden or scream at the White House press secretary and not be kicked out of the Biden White House permanently or ever. And like children who know they won't get in trouble if they do it, they did it. They screamed at Joe Biden and his press secretary. And like children who know they will get in trouble if they do it, they don't dare do it now because Donald Trump has crushed all of that. And so Donald Trump and Elon Musk got away with another lying session without any serious challenge from a single White House reporter, not one of whom asked Elon Musk how it felt to kill children. Not one of those White House reporters covering Elon Musk's farewell from government service asked him to reply to Bill Gates' description of Elon Musk as the world's richest man killing the world's poorest children. That is Elon Musk's singular achievement in government, because Elon Musk decided to destroy the United States Agency for International Development, the agency that was feeding more starving children in the world than any other agency. More starving children in the world depended on surplus food from the United States to survive. Food we do not need and cannot consume. Food we have overproduced in this country. And Elon Musk decided to take that food away from them and let them die. And that is not news to the White House press corps. No one is counting because Elon Musk fired the people who were counting. Collecting statistics in advanced economies is relatively easy, with advanced methods relatively accurate, but in many parts of the world, the most impoverished parts of the world, statistics can be hard to come by. Not every baby gets a birth certificate. Not every baby gets a death certificate. The people who would be counting how many people Elon Musk killed by killing USAID were the very people who Elon Musk fired from USAID. So Elon Musk commits the greatest crime of the 21st century against the poverty population of the world and fires everyone who would be able to quantify for us the enormity of the crime. The New York Times reports, quote, Mr. Musk's drug consumption went well beyond occasional use. He told people he was taking so much ketamine, a powerful anesthetic, that it was affecting his bladder, a known effect of chronic use. He took ecstasy and psychedelic mushrooms. And he traveled with a daily medication box that held about 20 pills, including ones with the markings of the stimulant Adderall, according to a photo of the box and people who have seen it. He had a whole box full of drugs that he could have been using when he was taking life-saving drugs away from children. The New York Times account is about the drugs Elon Musk was taking during the presidential campaign. NBC News has not independently confirmed the New York Times reporting. Elon Musk has not actually denied a single word of the New York Times reporting. The New York Times says, quote, we provided Musk with multiple opportunities to reply or rebut this reporting before publication, and he declined. The New York Times reporting suggests that Elon Musk took flight on a campaign stage with Donald Trump the first time he was up there because he was possibly on ketamine or ecstasy or Adderall or psychedelic mushrooms or all of the above at the same time. The Times obtained a text message before Elon Musk joined the Trump campaign in which Elon Musk complained about the investigations of his businesses that the federal government was doing at the time. The Biden administration views me as the #2 threat after Trump. I can't be president, but I can help Trump defeat Biden, and I will, he added. And the rest is tragic history. The richest person in the world poured money into a presidential campaign, more money than anyone else in the history of political contributions, and he did it to end the investigations that the federal government was aiming at his business activities. And of course, Donald Trump ended those investigations because you get what you pay for with Donald Trump, especially if you're the richest person in the world. The worldwide cruelty campaign launched by Elon Musk and Donald Trump now includes deporting people who have never committed a crime to countries where they have never lived and do not speak the language. Elon Musk seems to believe that cruelty is the antidote to empathy, which he considers a great human weakness. Elon Musk told the comedian Joe Rogan, quote, "The fundamental weakness of Western civilization is empathy." Abraham Lincoln did not know that. Abraham Lincoln believed he should govern with empathy. So did Franklin Delano Roosevelt. So did most presidents, some better than others. It was empathy coupled with geopolitical and public health wisdom that led President George W. Bush to create the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, which saved 26 million lives in Africa alone before Elon Musk decided those lives were not worth saving.
Has anyone in the world died because of what Elon Musk did?
Listen.
Yes or no, reclaiming my time. If you won't answer, that's a loud answer.
No one has died because of USAID.
The people who have died
as
a result of cutting off the oxygen of a woman in Burma and denying HIV/AIDS treatment to those in Africa. They are dead now at the hands of Elon Musk and his co-conspirators.
Who does more food aid than the United States?
Sir, why are you asking me questions? My job is to ask you questions.
You're the one that's claiming that
Secretary,
we're not.
I'm reclaiming my time. Secretary, I'm reclaiming my client. This is why I'm introducing the Rubio Act. So you focus on the one job that the Senate gave you to serve as our Secretary of State because you are clearly distracted, okay? After the last few months, I understand why President Trump has such colorful nicknames for you. You're obedient. You're following the rules. You will do anything the president tells you to do without regard for the law, the Constitution, America's security, or standing as a leader in the world. Unlike you, I do not fear crossing Donald Trump. I refuse to give up on these children.
Marco Rubio did not tell the truth to the committee, and the proof that he was not telling the truth is that he has changed his story after that testimony. The Washington Post fact-checked Marco Rubio's testimony, saying, "There is no dispute that people have died because the Trump administration abruptly suspended foreign aid. One might quibble over whether tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands have died." In his testimony, Secretary of State Rubio tried to contradict reporting from Africa from the New York Times' Nicholas Kristof. Nicholas Kristof responded to Rubio's testimony, writing in the New York Times, "Let me help Rubio with the truth. Meet Evan Anzu, a 5-year-old boy who was born with HIV in South Sudan. I mentioned Evan in a column in March from South Sudan. This was a child as precious as yours or mine. Evan's life was in our hands, and for 5 years, America kept him alive with antiretroviral medicines costing less than 12 cents a day through the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, or PEPFAR. This was a program started by President George W. Bush and has saved more than 26 million lives so far, and it turned the tide of AIDS around the world and built enormous goodwill toward the United States. Then along came President Trump and his freeze on most humanitarian aid in January. How could a 5-year-old orphan possibly obtain medicine on his own? Evan weakened and soon died of an opportunistic infection. Marco Rubio told the House committee, "No children are dying on my watch." Evan died on his watch. Evans of all ages are dying on Marco Rubio's watch, and no one is counting. And so we don't know, as of tonight, whether it's tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of Evans, but we know it will be. In a New York Times column titled, quote, Elon Musk's Legacy is Disease, Starvation, and Death. Michelle Goldberg reports Brooke Nichols, an associate professor of global health at Boston University, has estimated that these cuts have already resulted in about 300,000 deaths, most of them of children, and will most likely lead to significantly more by the end of the year. This is what Musk's foray into politics accomplished. If there were justice in the world, Musk would never be able to repair his reputation, at least not without devoting the bulk of his fortune to easing the misery he's engendered. Musk's sojourn in government has revealed severe flaws in his character, a blithe, dehumanizing cruelty, and a deadly incuriosity. Bill Gates has seen starving children in Africa many, many times and has devoted his life and his billions to trying to save them, which makes Bill Gates' verdict on the current richest person in the world so important and powerful. Bill Gates, the former richest person in the world, said, "The picture of the world's richest man killing the world's poorest children is not a pretty one. And the picture of the richest person in the world carrying around his drug box of ecstasy, Adderall, psychedelic mushrooms, and then taking life-saving drugs away from the poorest people in the world is a picture only Donald Trump could have created." And with Elon Musk and Donald Trump, soulless, mindless entities are what you see. We'll be right back. Joining us now is someone who's been there, Gabriel Emanuel, global health correspondent for National Public Radio. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. We are facing a challenge where no one is really counting what is happening in Africa, and anecdotal reporting of individual cases is where we begin. What have you found in your reporting?
Yes, so I started out with this clear discrepancy that you laid out. We have researchers, academics who are saying tens of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands dead. Secretary Rubio telling Congress that no one has died. So I started calling people on the ground from Bangladesh to Ethiopia to Guatemala to try and find out what is happening. And what came back were stories of people who have indeed died, most likely as a result of aid cuts. So let me tell you about one person. There is a family that lives in the far northeastern part of Nigeria. The mother's name is Mariam Mohammed, and she is a widow with two boys. The younger one is a 7-year-old boy named Babagana, and he had sickle cell disease, but most of his life, he was this cheery boy who she told me loved riding his bike to school and at home. And one night in February, the boy developed a fever. First thing in the morning, she rushed him to the hospital, to what was a U.S.-funded clinic where he had received care before. When she got there, the gates were closed. It was shut down. And the security guards told her this clinic is no longer operational. What had happened is that the previous week, they had received a stop work order from the U.S. government. Now, Mariam did not have money to go to the government hospital, which charged for medical care. And instead, her 7-year-old son, Babagana, died a handful of hours later that night. And when I spoke to her, she was obviously beside herself. And I spoke to the older brother, 9-year-old Umar, who was in tears when we spoke. And he just said he misses playing with his little brother. Now, we don't know the specifics. This boy was never evaluated that day when he went to the clinic, and it was closed. But I did speak to the boy's doctor. And Dr. Jacob, Idifri Jacob, and he told me that he believes they could have saved the boy. Now, sickle cell disease happens when your red blood cells are deformed and things can deteriorate very quickly, as they did in this case, but very rapid medical attention can save lives, and it often does. So that's just one story of multiple that I've heard.
As we go forward, how should we approach this situation where we're not going to have the kind of statistical information we would hope to have?
Right. It's very hard to pin down exact numbers, especially when we're talking about far-flung places and when the systems that used to gather this data are no longer in place. And I think the real answer here is it starts with talking to people on the ground. Doctors, nurses, religious leaders have a very good sense of what is happening on the ground, I found in my reporting. So do people who used to run programs that have now been shut down. So those are the types of people I've been talking with to try to piece together what's happening on the ground.
NPR Global Health Correspondent Gabrielle Emanuel, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
And coming up, The New Yorker's Evan Osnos will join us to discuss the unprecedented corruption that he has been finding in the Trump presidency, as have other reporters. His detailed account appears in the New Yorker under the title Donald Trump's Politics of Plunder. A vivid, grotesque portrait of ruling billionaires. That is how Democratic Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur of Ohio describes the new members-only club in Washington, D.C. called Executive Branch, which is set to open this month.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to share the latest photo of the founding of another billionaire private club here in Washington, D.C. in Georgetown for the super rich, spearheaded by Donald Trump Jr., J.D. Vance, and their billionaire buddies. You can join for the low price of $500,000. They offer the richest of the rich a red carpet to buy influence and their way to power. This executive branch club isn't just an insult to the working class. It's a vivid, grotesque portrait of ruling billionaires focused on totally enriching themselves and neglecting our nation.
Our next guest, Evan Osnos, writes in an article in The New Yorker titled Donald Trump's Politics of Plunder. Even seasoned practitioners of Washington pay to play have been startled by the new rules for buying influence. In December, a seat at a group dinner at Mar-a-Lago could be had for $1 million contribution to MAGA Inc., a super PAC that serves as a war chest for the midterms. More recently, one-on-one conversations with the president have become available for $5 million. The return on investment is uncertain. A government affairs executive told me, "What if he's in a bad mood? You have no clue where the money is eventually going." Another lobbying veteran described the frank exchange as outer borough mafia shit. Trump has sold influence so briskly that the political machinery cannot keep up. Joining us now is Evan Osnos, staff writer at The New Yorker and fellow at the Brookings Institute. He is the author of The Haves and Have-Yachts, Dispatches on the Ultra-Rich. Evan, when I was reading the veteran lobbyists of Washington, who were people I didn't want to deal with when I was working in the Senate, I just said, no, I'm not going near them. They are offended by the money changing in the temple now. This is beyond anything they ever dreamed of.
They are bewildered. As one of them said to me, and to use a technical term, he said, this is bonkers. I think there is a point at which the frank, naked exchange of influence for money has just exceeded even what are the calluses on a pretty cynical community in Washington that's used to the idea of this. This is now a period in which essentially anything goes, and you're seeing it in a whole range of ways. You know, it began really with the inauguration. Look, the inauguration fund, as you'll recall, raised a record amount of money, $250 million. Inauguration funds aren't like campaign finance that, get a huge amount of attention. These are sort of loosely regulated slush funds, in fact. The single largest donor to that was a company called Pilgrim's Pride. This is a poultry processing company. And sure enough, lo and behold, a couple months later, the administration announced that it would not be adding new salmonella inspections, and it would be getting rid of what it called unnecessary bureaucracy. You know, look, there may be no connection there. There may be no quid pro quo, but it sure is hard for the American public to understand what's going on and whose interest is the administration acting in.
And there was, prior to now, there was no legal way to put money in politicians' pockets. You could put it in their campaign accounts. And yes, they could use their campaign accounts to lease fancy cars for themselves and stay in hotel suites. And they could really use it for every meal they wanted to have with their families or everybody else. This is way beyond that. This is, you can now just put money directly in Donald Trump's pocket.
There is never been anything like a cryptocurrency auction for dinner with the president. I mean, the notion, the words that just came out of my mouth are so unrelated to the history of the American presidency, it's almost hard to just talk about it in the normal context. We're dealing with a moment in which the full monetization of the presidency poses us with a problem, poses us with a real fork in the road. Will Congress find a way to say this is unsustainable, this is untenable, or will it just allow this to go on until it produces a crisis? Will there come a point when all of a sudden the lack of new salmonella testing begins to have a daily impact, an impact on people's health, on the food they're eating at home? At what point does the rubber meet the road?
We have to squeeze in a commercial break. We're going to be right back with Evan Osnos. Evan Osnos is back with us. What is klepto capture, and who captured it?
It was a task force created in 2022 after the invasion of Ukraine. And the idea was pretty simple. The United States and its allies could seize assets belonging to Vladimir Putin or his cronies, things like yachts and apartments and houses around the world, and then sell them off and give the proceeds to Ukraine. Donald Trump quietly disbanded this task force after coming into office, meaning, in effect, that he is signaling to the rest of the world, we are no longer going to try to dissuade Putin's allies from Putin's cronies from participating and supporting the war effort. In fact, they're not going to try to give any money to Ukraine at all. And I think it signifies something larger, too, Lawrence, which is, in effect, you see Donald Trump both at home and abroad saying, I no longer recognize the category of white-collar crime. It doesn't matter to me. I don't regard it as legitimate. And you see this in the fact that they're no longer enforcing the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. And he is, of course, giving pardons, as you've talked about, to people who have been convicted or pled guilty to crimes that have defrauded people out of tens or in some cases hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, you take the case of Trevor Milton, somebody who received a pardon recently. He had been convicted of defrauding people by pretending to have an electric car that was speeding along when in fact it was rolling downhill. It has relieved him of an estimated $680 million in restitution. That's the kind of person that's getting a pardon.
The Trump children, before the first Trump presidency, there was that ceremony at Trump Tower where they were pretending that they would just not try to profit from the presidency at all. At least they were claiming they were not going to try to profit from the presidency. Now they're actually publicly, in effect, saying we are going to. We're going to open this club. We're going to do all these things, everything we can do.
The White House has a stock statement they give out, which says, in answer to any question about this, that the president has put his finances in the control of his sons. However, the reality is Donald Trump is actually listed as an advisor to one of the family crypto ventures. And any time that Eric and Don Jr. are overseas making deals, talking about it, they are doing it on behalf of the Trump family enterprise. Let's be honest here. And every foreign power that is making deals with them is not doing it on the basis of Eric and Don Jr.'s long history in business. They're doing it on the fact that it's they're representatives, in effect, of the president, even if the White House says there's some law.
And the sons do not have independent income sources. It's all out of the Trump pile. Their father gets the biggest cut of that pile.
And let's remember, there are ways that people who want to put money into the hands of this family can do it. One of the examples being, of course, Jeff Bezos' company, Amazon, which decided to cut a deal with Melania Trump for $40 million to make a documentary, reportedly $28 million of which will end up with the First Lady. This is something we've never seen. I think we have to begin to imagine that the profiteering in the presidency is going to be a feature for the next 3 years.
And it sounds like an ongoing story. It's a beat that's just going to have to be covered in this administration.
It's constant, and there's new things happening all the time. And the challenge for the public, and I think for journalism and for civil society, is to keep the focus on it. If you allow it to become regarded somehow as normal, if we define down the standards of the presidency, this will have an impact not just for the next 3 years, but for every politician who comes afterwards. That will become what we are in this country. And that's something that people have to decide. Are they willing to shrug?
Your reporting has met the challenge that we face. Evan Osnos, thank you very much for joining us. His new book out tomorrow is called The Haves and Have-Yachts: Dispatches on the Ultra-Rich. We'll be right back. New Yorker's Evan Osnos gets tonight's last word. The 11th hour with Stephanie Ruhle starts now.
Trump targets conservative legal strategist Leonard Leo amid tariff dispute fallout. President Donald Trump lashed out against conservative legal activist Leonard Leo yesterday, lambasting the former head of the Federalist Society as a real sleazebag and a bad person who, in his own way, probably hates America. In a post to his Truth Social platform, the post followed a 3-judge panel, including a judge he appointed to the bench, blocking enforcement of his administration's tariffs Wednesday night. An appeals court the next day temporarily reinstated the administration's powers to levy broad tariffs while the case is pending. Leo openly brags how he controls judges and even justices of the United States Supreme Court. I hope that is not so, and don't believe it is, Trump wrote. In any event, Leo left the Federalist Society to do his own thing. I am so disappointed in the Federalist Society because of the bad advice they gave me on numerous judicial nominations. White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller said in a CNN interview this morning that we're not going to be using the Federalist Society to make judicial nominations at all going forward. Leo and the Federalist Society were instrumental during Trump's first term in assembling a list of conservative judges for judicial appointments. In a 2016 interview, Trump touted his work with the organization, telling a conservative radio host he actually got the names from the Federalist Society, and that's considered pretty much the gold standard. And in 2019 remarks marking his administration's judicial confirmations, Trump offered effusive praise for Leo's work with the administration on confirming conservative judges. In a statement responding to Trump's post, Leo wrote, "I'm very grateful for President Trump transforming the federal courts, and it was a privilege being involved. There's more work to be done, for sure, but the federal judiciary is better than it's ever been in modern history, and that will be President Trump's most important legacy." Still, Trump's ire for the group did not seem to extend to his more recent judicial picks. Of the 6 judicial nominees he announced Wednesday, 2, Ed Artois and Jordan Pratt, are Federalist Society members. Elon Musk says he has differences of opinion with Trump administration. Elon Musk said he has differences of opinion with the Trump administration and doesn't entirely agree with some of its actions. His latest comments as he exits the administration. "It's not like I agree with everything the administration does," Musk told CBS Sunday Morning in a clip of an interview that's set to air on Sunday. "So, it's like I agree with much of what the administration does, but we have differences of opinion." He continued, "There are things I don't entirely agree with, but it's difficult for me to bring that up in an interview because then it creates a bone of contention."